Our Mental Health Matters is sponsored by the Mental Health Addiction and Recovery Services Board of Lorain County. For more information, go to mharslc.org or call 440-240-7025.
Racial trauma has been experienced by African Americans since their arrivals on these shores in the United States, and it continues today.
It exists and has always existed, but now that they're embracing it now and trying to make it less toxic to the point where people will feel a little more comfortable to share.
What has impacted us most within the Black community is that sometimes we don't seek the help when we need it most.
And sometimes you have to shine a light on something that is so painful and so dark, but it is when they start to make that connection. And yes, this inflammation that I've never spoken about is still inside of me, and I must release it.
My trauma didn't have a name. I didn't know what to call it, nor did I realize just the effects it would have on me for the rest of my life.
I just felt like it's natural to feel like angry, sad, and frustrated. So why could I also be, allowed to feel like I don't want to live anymore?
And you need not to be afraid to ask for help. I mean, the counselors are out there, clergy are out there, friends, family members. So speak up, and it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help.
If you're a person that's having problems trusting, and that is keeping you from engaging in therapy, I ask you to push past that.
Therapy did so much for me, and it was freeing in a way. It allowed me to be free.
One thing that I'll never forget is that they told me you can't always control the thoughts that come to your mind, but you can control how long that they stay there.
According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. Mental health is important at every stage of life. Our Mental Health Matters, addressing the mental health disparities in the Black community, is designed to bring awareness to the issues of mental health among African Americans and how we can break the stigma, deal with the barriers to care, and help to get people of color the support they need to get well. According to the Health and Human Services Office of Minority Health, Black adults in the U.S. are more likely than white adults to report persistent symptoms of emotional distress, such as sadness, hopelessness, and feeling like everything is an effort. Black adults living below the poverty line are more than twice as likely to report serious psychological distress than those with more financial security. Despite the needs, only 1 in 3 Black adults, about 25%, seek mental health treatment, compared to 40% of white Americans.
Historically, in the Black community and other communities, I'm sure, admitting that you might have a mental health illness or depression, anxiety, stress, it's been interpreted perhaps as being a sign of weakness, especially when you're talking about male populations. The strong Black male, we've been taught to be stoic, to man up, to be resilient, to deal with our problems as a fact of life. I mean, yes, there are situations that we have to learn how to deal with and in order to be able to cope and go through our daily lives. But at the same time, there are times when we do need to reach out to other individuals, support systems. One thing that we need to do is, in the family structure in the Black community, is to be more open, be more honest amongst our family members in terms of what disease states, what medical conditions are prevalent in our families. Because if you have a certain condition, diabetes, high blood pressure, prostate cancer, whatever it is, you may have a higher incidence yourself of acquiring that condition. That doesn't mean that you're going to just because you've had a relative with one of those conditions, but it means that you may have a greater chance, a greater risk factor for actually developing certain disease states that you need to be aware of, that, what disease states are prone to develop in your family. And that actually does include mental health concerns. I mean, if you have a family history of stress, depression, anxiety, even seasonal affective disorder, seasonal depression. I mean, these are conditions that are more prone to run in families, and so you need to be aware of that. Again, a lot of this has been handed down generation after generation to where there's a sense of helplessness and hopelessness in the Black community, not just in men, but also in our women of color also. And we're unfortunately, and it's sad to say, we're seeing this also in our younger children. There are higher escalating suicide rates in our young boys and girls.
For me, suicide honestly felt like the best decision to make at the time of being 13, 18 years old.
Coming up, Keandra Shores, a Lorain County millennial who is also a mental health advocate, shares her personal battle with suicidal thoughts.
Our Mental Health Matters is sponsored by the Mental Health Addiction and Recovery Services Board of Lorain County. For more information, go to mharslc.org or call 440-240-7025.
The suicide rate among Black people between 2018 and 2021 increased by 19.2%, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Being a child who was rejected and neglected by their father at such a very young age, and being 6 years old, and then having to deal with a mother who at times would verbally tell you that they wish they never had you, and then you losing your grandfather who was your protector, your guide. So at the age of 13, I found myself not wanting to live anymore because I felt that my parents who birthed me and raised me really didn't want me. So I felt that it was best to just, take a stage left and leave. I did see there was a reason to be here. Yes, I have a lot of friends, a lot of, colorful friends, as that I'm loved by the community. People know who I am. They know my name. But yet that didn't matter to me. How I felt was, if the people who brought me in this world didn't want me, then what does it matter about everybody else who cared to seem to like me outside of my household? So for me, suicide honestly felt like the best decision to make at the time of being 13, 18 years old. There's depression that I suffer from, which of course I knew. So it just reaffirmed what was already going on. And how I feel about it, I still feel normal. I still feel like I'm still Keandra. Nothing's changed. It does not have a hold of me. I have a condition now that means I dealt with depression. How I started coping before I actually really knew, or really, I guess we'll say, admit that I had a mental illness, was that I would write journals, write it out with poetry, listen to music. Music was really my number one safety. Like, that is my go-to thing when I'm just not in my right mind. Music is everything. I actually have a tattoo that says music is my drug. And so besides that, I would also say talking to people about it. Like now, I go to a counselor, which I'm so thankful to still go to actually be seeking a counselor. To have somebody that listen to you, somebody who's non-judgmental, who would actually listen to you and actually let you, help you think into what's the bigger problem and why you think the way you think and why you process the way you think. I was nervous the first time going to counseling because you don't know what to expect. You're literally about to tell this strange person everything about you. And so I just had to paint the picture like, Kiki, you do this all the time. You talk to strangers, no matter if you're in a store or what have you. So you talk, just talk. And so my first time wasn't as bad as I really thought it was going to be. It was actually comforting. But I didn't actually go into a lot, I would say, the first time. Now, being after a year, my counselor knows a lot about me. She knows that I still struggle with suicidal thoughts. There's actually been a time period twice, 2 time periods in this year, that I have stopped going for 3 months. And one of the first 3 months I didn't go, I was struggling heavily with suicidal thoughts again. I realized in that time, this time, now that I have a counselor to go to, I now realize I need to go to her. It's sad to say like that, but I need to go because I need somebody that I can just say how I feel without feeling judged, but also say how I feel and actually have somebody that can like comfort my emotions, my feelings at that time. My friends, my close friends, I should say, now, and even then when I started going, I think we're just waiting and just observing. They were just waiting to see what my response would be, only be now knowing a year later because they want to go themselves. Because I continue to talk about my counseling experiences, it has now made my friends like, I want to go, I want to seek counseling. And so it's now have opened the doors for friends as well as strangers, and I would say coworkers or strangers, you sometimes don't know them. Now let them know it's okay to go get counseling.
If you are experiencing suicidal thoughts, anxiousness, or helplessness, call the crisis hotline at 1-800-888-6161 or the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline 988.
Any person engaging in therapy has to want the healing. And quite honestly, the therapist cannot work harder than the person that is seeking the help. They have to be willing to do the work. The first part of the healing process is acknowledging that there is something in your past that you need to heal from, that you need to work through. In addition to unresolved trauma, there still can be people who suffer from depression, people who suffer from anxiety, people who just are overwhelmed and stressed because of maybe unresolved grief. And it takes time, it takes effort, and sometimes it takes a lot of different emotions. But if you continue to do the work and you stay focused on what it is that you want to get past, you can get healed. But just don't quit. When I think about some of the people who don't believe that there's any way that they will ever feel better, if they will ever be healed, and so they think their only way is to commit suicide. And that is a percentage that is growing in our community right now, in the African American community. And what I say to you is that there's always a way to work through your problems, your issues, your concerns, your trauma, that you do not have to commit suicide. The way to get over something, or someone, if that's the situation, if someone has harmed you, don't turn around and harm yourself. Work through it and know that there is a beautiful life ahead of you on the other side of your pain. If you're watching today and you're struggling with anxiety, depression, unresolved trauma, or unresolved grief, I urge you today to reach out and get the help that you need so that you can move forward in your life in a positive way and live the life that you deserve to live.
Amen. Hey. Amen. Amen. Amen.
The way the Black church deals with mental health issues and trauma is a direct reflection of how the Black community deals with mental health issues and trauma. Oftentimes we were never encouraged to go see a mental health provider. It was barely encouraged to see a medical and physical health provider. And so sometimes the challenge could be, when those things arise in the Black community, what do you do about it? Oftentimes individuals are pushed to the side in their families. They're the black sheep of the family. They're negated or not addressed in the family. And so likewise in the church, sometimes it happens just the same. I would say the Black church, to some degree, have dealt with mental health and trauma issues more from a read your Bible, pray, which are all great tools. However, I think sometimes the misunderstanding about mental health issues are not understood well. And so as a result, sometimes it's minimized or those issues are negated or not addressed effectively. And so when individuals are experiencing those symptoms, they don't know who to contact or who to reach out to or who to be, even to start to have the conversation about it. Spirituality is very valuable. It's something that's always historically been within the community. And as a result, talking to your spiritual leader is very important. It can be very helpful. And so that can be a start. But from there, a plan could be talking to a mental health provider in the community, someone who may look like you, who may understand your issues. But even if they don't know, they do know clinical. They do know mental health. And so sometimes it can be very helpful just to talk to someone who understands mental health issues and be able to develop a plan. That plan could consist of talking to a counselor. It could consist of talking to a psychiatrist or someone who can prescribe medication. Okay, not always. It also could include just talking to maybe a case manager to assist with resources and things of that nature. So there's a plethora of things that can be helpful in, addressing mental health issues.
Prayer is a weapon. Therapy is a strategy. And in a war, you need weapons, but you gotta also have a strategy. And so prayer and therapy are not equivalent. Jesus and therapy, I'm not saying they're equivalent. There is no name above that name. Jesus, prayer, worship, your word, weapons. Therapy, your diet, exercise, medication, strategies. Have your weapons, have your strategies, and live the abundant life God made for you.
Our Mental Health Matters is sponsored by the Mental Health Addiction and Recovery Services Board of Lorain County. For more information, go to mharslc.org or call 440-240-7025. And now, an encore presentation of 400 Years of Trauma, Connecting Racism with Health Disparities with support from IdeaStream Public Media.
We haven't addressed the trauma post-George Floyd, nor have most of us addressed it from 400 years.
Slavery, trauma, being separated from families.
My ancestors survived, but they perhaps had to endure some of the things that I'm reading.
And what they experienced was something that got translated all the way down 400 generations.
Addressing trauma, an experience that is emotionally painful, distressful, or shocking, is rarely discussed in African American communities.
It just went from one generation to the next generation.
Dr. Seema Patel is from the Center for Functional Medicine at the Cleveland Clinic.
When we look at the Holocaust victims, that has been well studied. We have not looked at African Americans who are descendants of slaves and the trauma that comes from that.
Where do we begin to understand the connection of trauma, racism, and health disparities?
Where we start is at the beginning. And the trauma of being enslaved.
They would be captured by African slave traders, and then they would have to walk who knows how far. Eventually they would get to the southern coast, where in Ghana there are a number of slave castles or forts, or they were originally called factories. They built it with dungeons, underground dungeons. We know that once people went through that door led onto the shore. And we can talk about tight packers. What I always think about is just the sway of the ship on the ocean, and people lying down and their bodies chafed, or even having to eat, having to eliminate. All of this in the same space. So it's understandable how so many people had diseases, they became ill, many died. They also resisted.
Although the Middle Passage involved many countries, 1619 marked the arrival of the first recorded Africans to English North America.
Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. My people.
So we're enslaved, and the trauma of being enslaved, the trauma of not owning yourself, of not owning your children, our inability to address that trauma affects our mental health, which affects our physical health.
I would be surprised if not every single person who endured that had post-traumatic stress disorder as a result.
Clinical psychologist Monica Williams is a researcher, author, and sought-after expert on racial trauma.
Racism, it's long and wide and deep. And I say that because it started from the very beginning, when Black people were enslaved as a way to rationalize enslaving another human being. This system was invented whereby there's white people and then everybody else who has less value.
We look at everything from Reconstruction to Jim Crow to civil rights to now. A lot of that we were fighting, and in that fight, in that struggle comes stress and trauma.
Dr. Barnett says healing begins when we talk about our trauma and realize
oftentimes if it happened to you, it probably happened to someone in your family, your mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother.
They also need to go further back and all the way back, because as you do that, you are able to release all the trauma because it was passed down through the gene line and it was never discussed and it was never talked about. It just went from one generation to the next generation.
Transgenerational trauma, also known as intergenerational trauma, it can show up biologically, socially, mentally, or emotionally.
Racism actually contributes to a lot of the healthcare disparities that we see. There's a area of medicine called epigenetics. Our bodies, our genes actually can be altered in terms of how our bodies interpret or express our genes, which can lead to higher rates of a lot of the disease states that we see. Higher rates of obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure.
So the more racism you experience, the worse your mental health, the worse your physical health. And for many reasons.
Both Dr. Williams and Dr. Barnett say more people of color should be trained and sent into the communities to bring more awareness about trauma and other mental health issues in places like barbershops, beauty salons, and churches.
Great and mighty is our God. Great and mighty is our God.
Licensed professional clinical counselor and minister Carmela Hill says the church mirrors the Black community in dealing with mental health issues.
Spirituality is very valuable. It's something that's always historically been within the community. But from there, a plan could be talking to a mental health provider in the community.
Addressing trauma dating back 400 years, its connection with racism and health disparities continues by building awareness, studying its effects, and working towards healthier outcomes for all African Americans.
400 Years of Trauma is a production of Intentional Content, Inc., and part of the Connecting the Dots Between Race and Health, a project of IdeaStream Public Media, funded by the Dr. Donald J. Goodman and Ruth Weber Goodman Philanthropic Fund of the Cleveland Foundation.
Our Mental Health Matters is sponsored by the Mental Health Addiction and Recovery Services Board of Lorain County. For more information, go to mharslc.org or call 440-240-7025.
My first experience with depression happened in high school. However, I wasn't going to counseling continuously. I would go through spurts, and this depression continued throughout my time in college. And when I was in college, I was alone more often than I was in high school. And I knew that if I didn't go get help on my own, then I was going to go down a path that I may not be able to come back from. In high school, I actually cut myself. And this was the first time of me like going to a hospital, going to the ward, and like being on a floor where people are diagnosed with mental illnesses. And this was something that I experienced again in college when I hit a breaking point. And I went to the hospital, and I'll never forget, it was a time where, you know, you have to check in and you have to let people know, let the health representative know like what's going on. And I was talking, and he was asking me questions, and he just said like, you know, why are you here? Like, you seem like you have everything going for you. You're on the right track. You have a good mindset. Why are you here? And at that moment, I understood that someone can have everything and it looks like everything's okay, but that doesn't mean that they're okay on the inside. When I go to counseling, I feel like, not to sound selfish, but it's all about me. I can truly talk to someone and tell them how I feel and know that I'm not competing with anybody else's time or energy, that I can truly say what I need to say in a confidential space, and that individual is going to give the best informed advice or counseling to my situation. My counselor that really helped me was faith-based, and they were able to give me scripture and base all of their advice from scripture. And one thing that I'll never forget is that they told me, you can't always control the thoughts that come to your mind, but you can control how long that they stay there. And for me, that helped me a lot, because sometimes we can see things that set us off, or we can hear things and it doesn't make us feel okay. But it's on us how long we meditate on that thought and how long or how much we let it consume us. If I had to describe my journey in one word, it would be resilient. I've know what it feels like to be at a low, and I know what it feels like to be at a high. It's not about staying up here or being happy all the time, but it's being able to continue to persevere throughout any circumstance and being able to acknowledge how I feel and make sure that I'm continuing to grow spiritually, mentally, and physically.
Our Mental Health Matters is sponsored by the Mental Health Addiction and Recovery Services Board of Lorain County. For more information, go to mharslc.org or call 440-240-7025.